So welcome everyone. I'm going to get us going because it is time and everybody got here and is ready to go. So you saw the agenda, what we were planning for today, and the coaches and me and Carol, if we, I don't know if we've talked 2 or 3 times since we met face to face, and we've talked about this session and what might be really good. So we thought we would start with the time management activity that we did face to face with. What, do people hear a little squeaking?
Yes.
Yeah.
Where is that little squeaking? Let me see if we can figure that out. I'm going to keep talking. Maybe it's me. We'll find out. Oh, am I squeaking?
Maybe.
If I talk, do I squeak? Yes.
It's after you talk.
It's after I talk. So I just have to keep speaking and never stop, and then it will be fine.
Sounds great.
So I'm gonna get my headphones and do that while I do this. So does everybody have a blank piece of paper, a pen or pencil, and some objects like yay, Tyler, there's your blank piece of paper, nice. And either some pennies or dimes or something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and on the screen we're going to ask you what you see to actually draw on your blank piece of paper, and then we'll talk about what we're going to ask you to do. But the idea here is that we're thinking about how you might think about how you organize your time for this project, and then we can have a discussion about ways to organize time, because it's because people have been asking, I think, about best ways to organize time. So I'm gonna share my screen and find that. Why can I not share my screen all of a sudden? Please let me share my screen. It's being so weird. Everything is being weird.
At the bottom, I have like a...
Yeah, I do. I usually do too, but I'm not seeing that for some reason. So hold on. Other people seeing share screen at the bottom? Wait.
I see a little person.
Oh, here I go. I got start share. It's in a different place for me for some reason. So here we go. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is the first image for you to draw on your own piece of paper. And so in the middle, you see your time. So it doesn't have, you don't have to take time to make it look like a roulette wheel. That's okay. If you want to and can, go for it. But for me, that would take days. So, and then around it are these different circles. So I'm going to just show these first ones first. Actually, let me see if I can make this smaller. I should be able to see it all. Yeah, there you go. You can see it all now, right? So if you draw this, and then we'll tell you what to do.
I'm looking forward to doing this again.
Say it again.
I am excited about doing this again.
Yeah. So since I'm sharing my screen, I actually can't see people. So can you tell me when people are done? Like if enough people are done that I can move on to what you're actually going to do.
All right, I got it.
You got it? Everybody got it?
Yes.
Okay. So now what you're going to do is you have your pennies or dimes or whatever, in 20 of them, and you're going to put them around what you just drew so that how you spend your time now. So each one is worth 5% of your time. So you're going to say, I spend 25% of my time on email and admin tasks, then that would be how many pennies or dimes or whatever. If each is 5% of your time, that's 5 of them, right? So you're going to take all of your 20 and you can put more than one on each one, but we start thinking about how you currently spend your time and put all your pennies, dimes, whatever you have there. And then we'll talk about that before we do the next part. There's 2 parts to this.
What would you consider meeting with classes and lessons like that?
Oh, is that what would others say about that?
Isn't
I
that
would
desk
say
coverage?
programs.
I would think programs.
Mm-hmm. Other questions as you're working on it?
I'm done. It was easy.
I also can't see who's talking, so that's okay.
Oh, Lisa.
Lisa, thank you. How are other people doing on this? Good. Are you done? Is everybody done?
Yep, done.
Wow. Wow, you guys are fast. All right, so the idea here is start thinking about how you spend your time currently. Where do people spend most of their time?
Email and admin tasks.
Mm-hmm. Others?
Email and admin is equal to my program.
Hmm.
Mine were pretty equal too.
What else? Anybody else? Or any of the team before we go on to the next part, coaches, have thoughts about current spending of time?
Email and admin tasks.
I would say admin is one of the biggest issues in the whole thing.
Yeah.
Especially if you're the only one there and you're the director. I mean, also, I think another one you don't think of too is how much time do you spend at the front desk helping patrons, even if you have library staff that can kind of do some of that stuff too.
Right, definitely. All right, so now the concept, oh, go ahead. Was somebody gonna say something? So now you're gonna turn your piece of paper over or get a second piece of paper. I didn't tell you to have 2. I did say blank, so I was thinking you would have 2 sides. So now you're gonna draw the same thing except, and let me just show you what that except is, if I can get this here, is you're gonna add and let me go smaller again, and you're gonna add a spot for community engagement. So you see how now there's something in here for community engagement. And the idea is that in order to work on this project, you have to start rethinking how you spend your time. So we want you to figure out where you're gonna take money from, or whatever you have, your pennies, your dimes, whatever, where you're gonna take it from to put into community engagement. So take a couple of minutes to do that.
Staff's on their own.
Take it all from staff.
Linda, how many X's should we be giving to community engagement?
There is no amount, and I'm going to ask the coaches to speak to this, but at the moment, just take some to put some in there. See how much you think you can do. If I stop sharing, everybody's got this, right? So I can, okay. Then you have that. All right. So, where are you going to put, where are you taking from for community engagement? Desk coverage? Ashley, is that you? And my desk coverage, programs, collections, admin, displays.
I was just having a conversation today
that one's in pretty good shape as far as I've done some extensive weeding lately, so that's definitely an area that I could maybe take a little bit from. And I'll almost have money for the school year.
I just got it actually.
Okay, wait. Carly, you're sharing your screen. Do you mean to be?
No.
Okay.
I'm just trying to figure this out.
All right.
I would take it out of desk coverage, I'm afraid, and maybe displays.
So how are you going to make that? So desk coverage, displays. Go ahead. Somebody else can say something.
Well, I was only half joking when I said staff meetings because I have been prepping them to do what they need to do when I'm in my office or not there if I'm out doing something. So I was only half joking.
No, that's fine. So what are the challenges going to be to actually?
I think there's going to be cleanup work.
She muted herself.
Somebody says, like, they'll come in and I'll have a list of things. They'll be like, Mrs. Smith's books wouldn't renew, or Mrs. Jones wants to order, you know, that blue book, and she said you would know what we're talking about. And yeah, so I anticipate that kind of cleanup work. You know, where staff was able to help about 80%.
What else?
I think I'll try to delegate more of my displays and some of the paperwork if I can.
Yeah.
For me, I'm looking at, yes, getting even more selective on my grant writing. I spend a lot of time grant writing, and that's something that I can adjust.
What about somebody working in a school library?
Is that what Carol's saying about she's equating desk coverage to teaching? Can you explain what you mean by that?
Can you guys hear? Yeah?
Not well.
Can hear?
Sorry, I hope you kept things going without me.
Allison did a great job.
Keep going, Allison.
No, everyone else keep going. Karen, can you type in the chat if we can't hear you?
Okay, I guess you can hear me. I'm taking from email and collection.
But now I'm confused.
Carol wrote something about, because Allison asked how it's going to be different for a school librarian. And Carol mentioned that desk coverage actually comes out of teaching for her. And so we were asking how that will look. But we couldn't hear her.
So you definitely from a school.
Is anyone on the chat, do they work part-time or have limited hours at their library?
Yeah, I get about like 25 hours a week.
Okay.
I'll just type in chat.
Yeah, well, Tyler, I mean, particularly for you, I think this exercise will be really helpful, particularly when you're communicating with your coworkers and probably your supervisor, just because normally within 5 hours, you probably pack a ton into that week. And so projects that take you outside of your normal service room. So really like look at this and get a solid idea, because I think it'll be really helpful for you.
Coaches, can you talk a little bit about how you were able to manage time from thinking about what we just were doing, how you like took from one to
pay the other, so to speak, and how you manage that over time?
Sure.
Go, Abby.
Last year, my circles, my movement looked a lot different than it does this year. I was just brand new to the teen services last year, and so I think that maybe made a difference in how I thought my time would go. But just like Todd was talking about part-time work, I really had to communicate with my supervisor, and it was really difficult to make sure that programming could be a focus. But on Zoom meetings, it just kept getting revisited, and I would brainstorm with Allison, and Todd, I think, was on the call too, about how to translate that and how to delegate things like displays. Your teams can do displays. I remember Carol saying that. And just stuff that we don't have to be so nitpicky in all the little stuff. We can especially get teen advice for collections, displays, programs, and then move our focus into the community facilitation.
For me, it's been actually I took away time from the desk and then also administration email time. It's actually been very positive from the staff. They have a lot more independence versus feeling they needed to be able to go to me for every single little question. So it actually, stepping away from that.
King is here.
Was a positive thing, because when I look at my circles from last year, it was 50% either admin and then desk coverage. And letting go of that and kind of giving some people some opportunities to have some more autonomy has been a real positive thing for everybody. So
seems like that would make a stronger team, Todd.
Yeah, I was new in my role as the director, so it was a good time to kind of figure all of that out. It's been a good thing.
Laura or Allison?
I'll talk. I think the biggest thing that I learned was, as a library director, I kind of, you need to know everything and need to know what everybody on staff's doing and all that kind of stuff. But there has to be like a good ground where you're okay to let things go. And I had to get to a place where I was okay that I knew everything, but I didn't have to do everything. So I took myself off the front desk. I took myself off, like, not all programs, but some that I have capable staff members that can pull it off. And I don't know why I wasn't using them. So it's kind of been beneficial because I've been able to find strengths and weaknesses and things that I know my staff would like to do versus they don't want to ever do again. They're happy that I'm back to something. But that's what I did. I had to know that I needed to know everything, but I didn't have to do everything. And so being able to take myself off the front desk is probably the best thing that I could have done, because it's okay to talk to the patrons and see them, but it can be a lot. And before you know it, 2 hours have gone by and you haven't taken a lunch break for the third day in a row. So, Todd knows, he understands.
One thing, Laura, too, that Holly talked about in our last cohort was being strategic with your email time. We're so used to instantaneously responding and just carving out specific time for email and then letting it go for the other 6 hours really, I think, helped her. I know it's helping me too.
That has changed the way I work. The rearranging email time has changed the way, honestly, I look at it first thing in the morning. I give myself a few hours and I maybe look at it in the afternoon, and it was really hard at first, but honestly, we think that we're capable of multitasking and doing all these things and sending emails and sending this and doing this all at once. But really, if you just focus for an hour or whatever, and then move on to another task and focus on that, you get more done. From what I've learned, the other thing is that if you are able to allot yourself time before the library is open to the public or any other hours outside of when you're open to the public, sometimes that's some of the most valuable time when you aren't you don't have those necessary distractions and things like that. So you can sit down and say, I'm going to give myself 1 hour. I'm going to look at the COP. I'm going to go through some of the materials and things like that. And I know it sounds hard to schedule that, but if you open at 8 or if you open at 9, you know, maybe even coming in 30 minutes and saying, I'm going to sit down for those 30 minutes and just knock this out.
And I'm going to add one thing, and that is to really think about what is, it's going to sound terrible, important. Because while I know displays have a place, I think that if we're trying to reach our community and teens, I have a thing about displays. I'll just say that I have a real thing about people spending lots of time on displays because yes, they're yay. But if you're really trying to think about how you're going to make it, thank you, Diane. If you're going to try and think about how you're making a difference in teens' lives and getting to know community, displays isn't it. So I don't think. Push back, tell me I'm wrong, but right? So it's really thinking about how you're going to meet the priorities for supporting your community and rethinking maybe what you do, which email fits that too, right? Collective gas.
Another issue too was, I agree with you on the display. Displays have a purpose, but like for us, it was, I know I can pull it off, but there's got to be somebody else that can totally take the reins on putting that display together. And maybe it don't look good at first, and then you work with them and you figure it out. Or maybe you have somebody awesome that you didn't know had the ability to create all this stuff because you're doing all the work, and then it's twice as good now. You're just, somebody else is able to take that weight off of you. Don't be afraid to give something up. Trust me.
Meeting rooms. That's something I gave up. Scheduling the meeting room. Some of you may have electronic sources that do that, but we're still old school paper calendar. People call, you write it down in the calendar and you schedule. If there's somebody that, somebody is capable of taking those tasks that may seem kind of just like it's ingrained in your schedule, but somebody should be able to do those types of things if that's something that you're tasked with.
Abby, finding someone in the community to do the displays, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
My teens have so much fun doing it, and I can imagine that maybe a gardener or anyone else who has some skill or knowledge base or wants to find other people to connect with could use that space in a really cool way.
Absolutely. Other questions, because one of the things the coaches and I have been talking about is that getting started with this, it's hard to maybe find the time. So other challenges people are having as you get started with this, finding the time to start integrating this work. Maybe it's not on the roulette wheel, but other tasks that you have to do that you want to rethink how you do them so that you can better future redify your library.
I'll tell you something else that really helped me that I didn't think about until I was done with the project was, so you have to keep your board informed, right? Your library people, you have to keep those people informed, or your principal or whatever. And I I wish I would have gone back and done one like monthly collective update than a lot of little ones. Because not that you shouldn't like update every week what's going on, but for my board that's more of a very laissez-faire, they're not going to really, they're here when they need to be. You guys know that. It worked out better to kind of keep them informed, but not have 7,000 emails that you had to go back and then reply to everybody individually and do all this stuff. I learned that being able to kind of keep the players that I needed to about the project informed when I did it more cohesively toward the end than at the beginning when I just kept sending emails. It was a lot better, and I was able to get back to the meat and able to find all the things I needed for a report better than in the beginning.
Carla, can you tell us a little bit more about that, the grants?
If I can figure out how to do this.
You're doing good.
Okay. My library director pretty much turns it over to me and says, you know, here's a program for STEM kits. Why don't you write a grant for that? Because she doesn't have time. So I find myself really wanting to fill out as many grants as possible. And maybe I'm just overdoing it, but we need the funds. So how much time should that take?
Writing grants?
Uh-huh.
I think it depends on the grant, just to be honest.
Okay.
I write a lot of grants for my library. That's why I chimed up here. I think because like the grants for this particular program, you'll know which grants fit which program.
Right.
So I wouldn't take a lot of time to worry about if you're solely wanting to benefit this program, really seek it out and stuff on what you're looking for. But time wise, it just depends on the grant. Every grant is different. I would say that if it's a bigger corporation or if it's a lot of money, I would probably take a couple of days to really hone in and get your material you need, because a lot of the things you're going to need for one grant, you're already going to have for the other.
Okay.
Like statistics, ideas, numbers of things. I don't know if you put free and reduced lunch rates to help people understand how poor your community is. You're going to need that same number for every other grant that you write. So a lot of your work is not necessarily has to be done over. It's just a matter of what the parameters for the grant are.
Thanks.
And I would say that in thinking about this, I'm not muted, am I? No. I would say that in thinking about this project, that the grants you might first figure out what you're going to do, because it's hard to say the grant money is going to go to this unless you know what your project is, right? So it might be more that later on the grants you write are more related to this.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you'll have all that information from the other ones.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. How are others doing with time and figuring out how to get this started? And Lisa, totally understand. You just wrote somewhere that it's a crazy time of year, so totally get that. And then I see, Todd, your question about explaining. That's a good question too. So first question, any more about time? We really just, and actually in the earlier, we had a cohort 2 Future Ready meeting earlier today. And we were talking about how over time, this time thing changes, right? Allison, do you remember what I'm talking about? Or Laura, you were there too. Can you explain that a little bit? Allison, go.
Well, just in the beginning, especially, it's going to take more time. You're reaching out to your community and you're trying to set up meetings and you're trying to learn about what your community needs. That research is going to take a little bit longer. So some weeks you may spend almost, 10 hours running around, having meetings, things like that. But then over time, it just becomes part of your thought process and becomes part of what you're doing on a regular basis. And it kind of infiltrates your programs already. So you spend less and less time. Once you get that groundwork and the ball rolling, everything starts to happen easier. And it's also easier to implement that future ready mindset into programming that you're already doing. So it fluctuates from week to week. You may be so busy with programs and things like that. One week you don't get a chance to spend a lot of time on this, and that's okay. And then the next week you might spend, like I said, 10 hours doing these things. So, but ultimately in the end, I would say, I think what we said is really on average now, I spend about 5 hours a week just thinking about Future Ready and how we can implement it into what we're already doing, how I can continue doing that with the community.
I agree with what Allison said, because once starting off is rocky, you're not really sure where you're going. It takes longer. You ever feel like you drive to a destination and it takes forever to get there, and then on the way home, you're like, it didn't take that long to get home at all. That's the same concept. Like, it feels like it's going to take forever to get there. But once you get all the pieces worked out and you're like, oh, this is the actual program that I'm going to do, then it's like cakewalk. It speeds through and you're like, oh, I'm ready to do this again. So it will get there. Allison's right. Some days you'll think you'll spend 1 hour and some days you'll spend 10.
Abby, talk about the work-life balance thing.
That's just a struggle for me. I bring things home to do them so often, and I'm wondering if other people especially on my team, I was thinking of Megan, who just has this little babe, you know, she's just barely coming back to work. I'm wondering how that feels for someone in her situation or a similar situation who may not have tons of hours at work, feels like you can't get everything done that you want to. For me, when I have things going on personally, I don't get as much done in work because I do it a lot at home.
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about that, but I'm actually curious how this looked, how it was, your ideas and programs were different for the public library versus the school library, and also the time issue that we're talking about, because a lot of the school librarians cannot leave the library at all throughout the day, you know, and so I'm wondering how in cohort 2, how did some of the activities and programs differ?
They differed a lot. And you're right. It is a challenge for the school. I'm sorry. That's all right. That was fun. Hey, let's just do it. Periodically, someone share their screen and we'll get to see something cool. I'm sorry, that was just like, whoa. So it has been more challenging for many of the school library people. Partly less about the time, I think, than about, and Megan and Amy as school library people, and whoever else is in here who are school library people, it was more, it sounds weird, but I said the display thing already, and you already all know that I have things, but it was more about a mindset and figuring out how to rethink working with teachers and administrators and community. And maybe it was more about advocating for a new mindset about that than actually the mindset. Does that make sense? So like I found that school library people had all really wanted to do it, but they didn't know how to infiltrate in the way that the public library can. Does that make sense at all and help at all? Megan, does that make sense?
At the same time, I think we have our kids right here, and I think that makes that part of it easier for us. We don't have to go out and look for people to do our program. So maybe it evens out a little bit.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with him, and I just told him that, like, this is going to require me to go out and have some meetings. And we had a conversation about it, and so far he's good. I haven't gotten out yet.
Good.
Other people on the school side, I know that you are, Megan, you're not the only one who's brought it up.
So there was a gal in cohort 2 who wasn't.
I tried to share my screen, but I can't because I don't know. Sorry, Abby.
No, it's good. Yeah, there was a gal in cohort 2 who is not a school librarian, but she pretty immediately made a almost like a committee for this purpose. And so I'm wondering if you could make some initial contacts, and then everyone gets to, I mean, there's only delegation for who's reaching out to everyone. So you personally don't have to take all of the time out of the school. Does that make sense?
And Abby, you're also reminding me that one of the things in cohort 2 that we suggested for school library people was for the walk around that we're having people do this month, that we actually said walk around with somebody else from your school in your school. So don't go to a neighborhood, but look at a hallway or the classrooms in a brand new way to start thinking about how you might look at your school differently and what you take for granted. And even thinking about, who is it that I was talking, Bailey, I was talking to the other day, and her library director is going with her on her walkabout. She posted that on the community practice. And, taking a principal or taking a teacher to look at your school from a different perspective could be also a good way to talk about Future Ready, which I think goes back to what Todd posted. to get some more ideas about that. And then several people have gone into the school, like Laura's program is in the school, Mandy's program is in the school. And so maybe it's working more with the public library too, to bring the two together and be able to bring some of that social emotional stuff into the school, not just do it on your own. Oh, guidance counselors are great. That's a great idea, Carol.
Yeah, I think Carol has a really good one. There's so many people already in the school, like teachers and guidance counselors and parents and teens that you can reach out to. You don't necessarily have to leave.
Really good
but
point.
I think if it's possible, I still think that it's important to take a step out sometimes, if possible. And maybe talk to some of the other organizations and stakeholders for teens in the community as well.
I think it's important to find true collaborators, because if you don't and you're doing everything on your own, it's going to take all of your time. There's no way around it if you're not part of a team or a partnership or creating a community focus group.
And actually, just to say that our session next week, I have someone coming from a middle school. She's the student success. There's another word there, but it's not called manager. It's student success person at one of the middle schools here in Seattle. And she's going to be talking about working with middle schoolers in the school. But you might actually even ask her questions when there's time to ask her about, well, how would you bring this to a school, or what partners might you think about? But she's going to focus specifically on, the world of middle schoolers and how she supports them in the school. So I think that's a really key piece here. Todd, talk about that, describing this to others. After you unmute yourself.
Myself. I just remember when I started the project, I would say Future Ready with the library, middle school, career awareness, and I found quite a bit of time simply explaining the project and how just like what it was about, and getting a lot of it led to a lot of really great conversations. But I was just wondering if anybody has struggled with just communicating what the project is and how it ties into your goals for your library, your school, in general. Just because, part of this project is vague in a certain sense because we're all exploring. So I just didn't know if anybody else had encountered that yet. I hear typing, so.
I was muted. I think that's Linda.
And one thing too for this is off topic, but with the school librarians, if your school has a makerspace or a makerspace program, I would really, if you're struggling, reach out to the person who runs that, because yes, they're teaching makerspace, but if they're not tying in a career profession behind those skills, maybe that's an opportunity to partner in a different way. And it's somebody down the hall from you. That was part of my collaboration last year. So. Okay, so Tyler, you've reached out to people that haven't heard back. Somebody told me once, they said, try calling 3 times and then just let it go and move on to the next. They're just not that into you.
And I would say, Tyler, too, the other thing is they might not understand what you're trying to do, right? So it goes back to what Todd was saying. I think the message is, I want to learn about your work, as opposed to come help us in this project or collaborate with us. So any other,
and how can we help you, instead of what can I add to your workload? Because you don't want them to feel like we're going to make their life harder.
Yeah. I think it's that message we send and helping people to get back. And Amy, you said the broadness is you a little stumped. Can you expand on that?
Well, when I originally started thinking about this, I was thinking about like careers that are not maybe all college, because we talked about how we focus maybe too much on that. But I sent these surveys out. I've gotten quite a few back, and I hit the jackpot last night, and a guy is sending it to like Rotary and Chamber and all these different people. So I think I'll get a bunch more surveys soon. But I think we need to touch more on like conflict resolution. Some of that seems to be bigger, and then that scares me more because it would be much easier to just plan like, hey, come talk about your career, than how are we going to get these concepts out to kids. And so then that becomes a bigger, different thing that I wasn't thinking of, but I think that's where I'm headed. So I'm scared. You want to like give me directions and stuff like that. I'm really good at that.
So Laura's program, or whatever you call it, Laura, was all the social emotional stuff, and it's all the things Mandy talked about too. It's not, at this age, it's not about, hello. At this age, it's not about, that's awesome. I love this stuff. Dogs, cats, babies, it's all good. No, it's all good. I love it. But and I love that you said that about this is not your forte or something. That's not the word you use, but that's actually in 6th, 7th, 8th, 5th grade. That's where young people are, like thinking about their career. That's not going to resonate as much. So Laura, do you want to, I know you've talked about it before, but maybe talking a little bit more about how you approached it and in the school as a leadership activity?
So do you want me to talk about how I made the connection with like the teachers or the staff, or
be the focus less on career and more on social emotional stuff?
Well, one of the advantages we had was nobody was really targeting that aspect, but I don't know, I've been around the school a lot, and I've seen some of the issues that the kids have, and I noticed that for this particular school, they're in the door, they're out the door, there's no identity. And part of developing your identity is honing in on those leadership skills. So if you don't know really who you are and what you think you might want to be, or you might not even know who you want to be, you can't really have an identity. So you don't have any leadership. You're not able to take control and take charge and do that. So that's really why I thought that might be a workable thing. I ran the idea by somebody, and they just happened to have the curriculum, so I didn't have to spend the money, because one of the things that happened when I talked to the school system, and I'm curious if anybody else had this happen too, was their first thing was, well, how much is it going to cost? Because we have no money. So you can do it, but there's no money to do it yet. So that was, that was a little, okay, I got to come up with something. But I thought that honing in on a leadership skill, they did not know who they were and what their identity was. And my goal was to help them try to figure out a little bit about who they could be in life, what they could do to get to that point. So when they went to those career classes and they thought, hey, I'm really good at this, or I've honed in on this leadership skill, I could be a nurse, or I could be, a librarian, or whatever my skill set would be. And once I was able to sit down and talk to those kids, Linda, our meetings that we had, we followed the curriculum, but we really had good conversations a lot of the time with some reflection. That's when, I had the girl that said her brother wanted her to die, and we talked about how our words matter and that we don't say things to certain people. And then we had her talk to us about that, and she didn't know who she was. And then by the end of it, we were able to kind of help her, understand a little bit more about that she was a good person and that there's good things out there. You know, a lot of it was just building up their emotion, building up their esteem to know that they're worth something. I made sure, I mean, a lot of those kids, I remember a few of them that would talk to me about how they did not want to sit. They didn't want to go to lunch because they were worried about where they would sit because they didn't want to feel alienated while they ate their lunch. And that told me that I had all these kids that were all in these different realms and cliques and everything under the sun that you get in 7th and 8th grade. They felt like they were unloved and they felt like they didn't matter. So why would they matter what their career choice is going to be? Nobody cares about them now. Why should they care about themselves? And so I wanted them to try to figure out that they were good people and that they have greatness within them. And all they had to do was have somebody to tell them that. And that's why I felt that that was appropriate for what I needed in my community.
It's funny you should bring that up, Laura. Yesterday I was speaking at Rotary and I was talking with the Rotarians about what is it that they think that teens in our community need. And one of the answers came back with, they need to know that they are wanted, that we want them, that we like them, we want them to succeed, we want them to recognize their own self-worth. So I like that you said that, it backed everything up from yesterday.
Well, good, because I had a lot of kids that did not feel like they were worth anything and that nobody cared about them and nobody loved them. And they're like, well, you don't even know what goes on at home. And I said, I don't have to know what goes on in your home to know that I care about you and I love you and I want you to have greatness and let's talk about this. And as a result of that, I had kids never use the library that started coming here. And we were creating a safe place and we didn't even know that that safe zone was being created just by that moment. So we talked about careers and we put an emphasis on it, but we also knew that there were other groups in the community that were already doing that. We were just kind of paving the way so that when they got to that class to learn about a career, they felt confident enough that, hey, just because somebody didn't want to sit with me at lunch doesn't mean that my life is over and that I can't go be a veterinarian or I can't go be a teacher one day.
I really like what you said. I want you to have greatness about all of them.
I've told every kid that I get to meet, and even adults, I want all of you to know that you have greatness within you. You probably don't even realize that you have greatness within you. And just, you have it in you, and nobody can tell you any different. And that is so hard because you hit a time in your life, and when you get older, that you start to think that you're not worth anything. You've passed your prime. You can't do all this. No, your greatness never leaves. It's just a matter of when or where you're going to pull that out of yourself.
And youth probably feel the same way of the reverse. Like, I'm not old enough yet to feel like I've found my greatness or able to contribute.
Well, and you have different steps. So you have different journeys in life. You find greatness when you accomplish a college degree or you do this or that. But like all of my friends are married and have children, and I'm 31 and I have not had either of those things. So I keep saying, well, I've missed the mark on that greatness that everybody experiences, but I have to keep telling myself, no, my path is just that way and it'll get to where it needs to get. And that was one of the things that I had to help the kids understand is your path comes at a different point. You know, one girl really wanted to play sports and she wasn't good at it. And she was like, what am I supposed to do? All my friends do that. And it was like, well, it's okay if you can't play I can't play basketball, but I know you've got something really good inside of you and we're going to work with this and you're going to do something great in life. So you should tell everybody that they have greatness within them. I challenge all of you to tell somebody that. It'll make you feel better.
And if you think about what Crystal did when we were in Salt Lake, when she talked about connected learning, I mean, their greatness comes from what their interests are, right? So then if you also connect to I love whatever, then they can build on that, because what you're interested in, all of us here, helps to make you great. It helps to lead you to success. So focusing on those things that middle schoolers are really passionate about, and then helping them to find greatness within that, which can also lead to a career, is pretty awesome stuff. Just reading the chat. So are there, what kinds of updates do people have? That was the other thing. We've got about 10 minutes left. This is awesome. But updates or questions people have about what you're working on, something you'd like to tell us all. I was talking to Valley earlier this week. She couldn't be here today, and she was just saying how how helpful it's been to see all the posts on the community of practice. So that really has been amazing. You all have been really awesome about that. But things that are coming up that you want to make sure to ask or tell us about what you're working on?
I know some people are working on handouts and surveys, and it'd be great to see those on the COP.
I agree. I'm curious if anyone has had ideas about who to take on their walkabouts. Diane and I talked about this because she has a community college that's relatively close, and she's had volunteers and paid staff from them come intermittently. And I think that you had, I don't know if she's still on, Diane had one. Yeah, awesome. So she had one who actually grew up in her community, who then went to the college and then came back to do some work for her. And I think that would be such a good person to get a perspective after they've left and then come back and see.
Yeah, I went yesterday to, there are actually two colleges that I work with. One's a community college and one's a four-year college. And yesterday I went to the four-year college, Austin College, and met with the professor of digital studies and learned so much about esports and e-games, which Abby, you know, is a direction I've been investigating. And he spent an hour and a half with me, and we just talked about, you know, what kids are interested in once they're in college. So I'm meeting with those in the community college, the middle school counselor. So I've got a lot of people in this community who are luckily interested in helping.
I forgot I was muted. I love that, Diane.
Are there, so if some of you've done this already, are there things you've learned or noted? And by the way, I love taking the husband who is a business owner. I'm sorry, that sort of cracks me up at the same time, Amy. I think that's great. Anything people who have done this already have started to notice, or any advice for others who haven't done it yet?
I think it would be awesome to take a supervisor or someone that you want to be invested in the project or believe in the project, because their input's going to be really valuable.
It was interesting to me, the people I contacted at the community college had just that week, one of their board of trustees meetings had been discussing that they thought it was important to start zeroing in on middle school students, that they did dual courses and things with the high school students, but they had recognized that they needed to reach the kids at a younger age.
Well, from my discussions in the last 2 weeks, Indiana is just making some changes, and the changes are going to actually have to do with computer science and also with careers. And in the past, that was always, you know, well, computer science standards are going to be added to a lot of states, but there's going to be now kindergarten through 12th grade required computer science. And so that was kind of something like, well, maybe that direction, would that be something that could help kids be career ready? But then also careers, they're changing all the high school kind of pathways, what they call them. And so then they're also thinking they need to reach middle schoolers. So they're thinking exactly the same way as this program is thinking, that that middle school students are not being helped or guided as much. And my school has actually just bought a whole system where it's helping 5th through 12th grade, and every year they're going to be doing lessons that have to do with what are your emotional strengths, so it's like all these things are just coming together that are along with or aligning with the goals of the Future Ready and the library. So there's so many different projects, and it's for me now, how am I going to kind of weed it down to what I could help with the best.
I love that. I'm going to post, I'll add a link. I don't think I've done it yet on the community of practice about social emotional learning in a video that I think goes directly with what you were just talking about, Chris. It could be interesting. Anybody else? So much great chat. Yay, the football team.
There has been so much chat.
I love the football team idea.
Yeah, it's gonna be cool to hear.
It's one of those groups that we forget because we think they're all right. We think the football team, they're all social, emotionally, career ready, but they actually need some help probably. So that's really great. I love that you're talking to the coach. Great, Lisa.
Yeah, as a former high school football player, they need future ready. Badly, so.
I bet you were such a rockin' football player, Todd.
What did you, just out of curiosity, what position in football did you play?
I was a tackle, Laura.
Okay.
Way to go.
I'm impressed.
I'll post my
Please.
high school football photo on the COP.
Please, that's wonderful.
That's great. All right, John had you pegged as a quarterback, Todd.
No.
That's great. Coaches, any last words for anyone in the end of our first Zoom?
I'm excited you're all here. This is a big group. On day one, it's awesome.
I would say, Lee, just be inspired that it's going to be okay. That you're going to get this and everybody's going to have a good project and it's all going to work itself out.
Linda, what did Nisa say? Bite-sized chunks.
Yay! Bite-sized chunks, definitely.
Try to take it in bite-sized chunks.
Yep.
So I texted into the chat, but in case anybody missed that, if you go to YouTube and type in Kansas Humanities, there's this video and it's about 4 minutes long and it is so inspirational. And I've just been starting my day off with that each morning. And
that's great.
Amazing. It's amazing. So go and just spend 4 minutes and it's just all about telling stories and how stories connect us all.
Todd, any words?
Just the walk was my favorite thing, and it really was the moment where things started to click for me. So look forward to it, and I'm interested to hear how people look at their community during the winter time, because I think our group kind of did it more around the spring. So just to hear the different perspectives on it.
And the one thing I'll add is, remember, this is month one, basically. We've been in this for a month. I will again tell you, Allison, not to put her on the spot, is not launching her project that she's been working on for a year until January 3rd. Right, Allison? That's the right day?
January 3rd is our first workshop, yes.
So don't put pressure on yourselves to have this done. If we see you working and you're figuring things out, someone today in our earlier Zoom said, oh, we just got this set, right? So give yourself time. Do not jump into anything because we don't want you to, and we're not forcing you to. So give yourself time. Any last words or questions? Well, thank you all. Thank you, coaches. Thank you, Cohort. I will be posting this tomorrow. I will link to it on the COP. And then next week, like I said, we'll have a guest speaker who will be talking about the world of middle schoolers. And your coaches I know have been in touch, so keep in touch with them. And if you have any other more general project-y questions, let me know. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.